Consider the representation of gender in a pair of texts from the course. In John Milton's Paradise Lost 1667 and the King James Bible 1611, women are represented as secondary to men and presented as if they are the root of all problems through the character of Eve, which has led to how women have been treated across history as the second gender due to society using religion as a crutch for millennia. In this essay, I argue these points referencing various extracts from the Bible and Paradise Lost to present my argument, such as in the Garden of Eden and Eve's actions within the garden. For example, her eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge because Satan, also known as the serpent within the garden, told her to, and what those actions eventually lead to in both texts. I also look at the difference in how these texts are written, despite describing the same events that take place. Within the Bible, women are presented as inherently secondary to men, even in the beginnings of humankind. When God produces a rib from Adam, the first man to produce Eve, the first woman and the mother of all sin. This is followed by the verse, "And Adam said, This is our bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." Genesis 2:23. This verse supports my argument as Eve is presented as secondary, and because of this she is inherently inferior in the relationship between her and Adam. As well, Adam was born when the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, Genesis 2:7. Eve was born from Adam, immediately creating a hierarchy of gender between the two, despite them both being the first two humans. However, others, PLE 2022 12-13, suggest that Adam was an androgynous being that contained both female and male essences, which is supported by Genesis 1:26. So God created man in his image. In the image of God he created them. This is followed by the suggestion that by using the plural pronoun them, one androgynous being is being referenced, which would later split into two, Adam and Eve. I refute this claim, saying that within the verse, the pronoun them is being used in its singular form, which continues to view Adam and Eve as separate beings. God also refers to Adam as Adam before Eve is created, allowing the reader to infer that the pronoun them is being used in the singular form. The verse frequently utilizes repetition, such as bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, woman and man. By utilizing repetition like this, the idea that Eve is of Adam is sunk further into the reader's mind, cementing the hierarchy to be viewed as normal. Within this verse, the proper concrete noun woman is used to describe Eve. The root word contained within woman is man, which is the descriptor used to refer to Adam. By using the same root word to describe both of them but adding the wo prefix to this version of the word used to describe Eve, it presents her as secondary, as an edited version of the original, as inherently inferior compared to Adam, and as she is the first woman, she is the model for all those who come after her, presenting the female gender as overall or worse than the male gender. Women continue to be presented as secondary to men throughout the Bible, which can even be seen when Adam and Eve are first presented together in Genesis, in the verse, "And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed," Genesis 2:25. This verse shows the power imbalance within the couple through its wording, the man and his wife. By referring to Eve as Adam's wife instead of the woman, which would be the correct counterpart to the man, it creates a clear power imbalance between the two by assigning roles to them almost immediately and making one inferior to the other. Supporting my argument, Gelman, 2006, 324-325, argues against the view presented by authors such as Tribble and Bird that the power dynamic present between Adam and Eve is due to Eve's sin of eating the apple. Gelman argues against this, suggesting that the power imbalance was not due to Eve's sin and that Adam and Eve were originally created as equals, but suggests instead that there was no equality to begin with, supporting my argument that the hierarchy between the two began at their creation rather than due to Eve's actions. As well as this, within the verse, the possessive pronoun his has been used as a literary technique to further emphasize the clear power dynamic between Adam and Eve. The possessive pronoun his, used in this verse, provides the implication that Eve is something that Adam possesses like an object, creating a visible power imbalance that continues to affect society overall and support an imbalance between gender roles that still exists today. The power imbalance between Adam and Eve in the Bible only becomes more visible after God finds out Eve has eaten the apple, as within his punishment for the couple, God outlines a clear hierarchy in the verse, "Unto the woman he said, I will multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." Genesis 3:16. By proclaiming that Eve's desire shall be to Adam, a clear dynamic is created between the two genders. Within Genesis 3:16, the modal verb rule is used to describe Adam's relationship with Eve as by God's decree. By using this, a controlling dynamic is cemented between the two characters, with Adam having control over Eve, ruling her like one would rule a kingdom. This is supported by Myers 1983, page 347, who refers to the original Hebrew Bible and its translation, speaking about how the word used in Hebrew meaning rule was also used when talking about how Solomon ruled over his kingdom, as well as the context the modal verb is used in throughout Genesis. This dynamic has led to a power imbalance between men and women over time, due to societal expectations because of society's use of religion as a crutch to explain the unknown, as well as reinforce standards that put specific groups of people into power. In Paradise Lost, the gender hierarchy is still present throughout, as Paradise Lost is a retelling of the Genesis chapter of the Bible. For example, in Book 4 of Paradise Lost, Satan sneaks into the Garden of Eden and sees Adam and Eve for the first time and thinks about the pair. Not equal as their sex not equal seemed, for contemplation he in valour formed, the softness she in sweet attractive grace, he for God only, she for God in him. 4 296-299. This is important as it shows that even from an onlooker's perspective, a clear power dynamic can be seen between the two, based on gender, even from someone who likely has not been exposed to the idea that men should have power over women. Within this extract from the text, Milton has used sibilants for describing Eve using a series of S sounds such as softness, she, and sweet. Through this, Milton shows how sibilants can be linked to serpents, connect to Eve early on to the serpent she will meet later in the story, and foreshadowing the events that occur in Book 9. Within this extract, the verb seemed is interesting as it shows that even from the outside, a clear power dynamic can be seen even through first impressions. Other authors such as Orth 2014-7 can support this view, also looking at the use of the verb seemed in the text as well as the language used in the last line of the extract from the text. Overall, Milton wrote Eve in this way as this was how her character was presented in the Bible, and he didn't want to change how she was written. As well as this, Milton would have been writing for a 17th century audience, so the attitudes towards women would have been quite conservative and aligned with those presented in the Bible. This unequal relationship dynamic continues throughout Paradise Lost, which can be seen in multiple points throughout the epic. One moment where it can be seen quite plainly is within Book 9, in which Adam and Eve have their first argument about whether they should split up or stay together while working. Within this argument, Adam states, "The wife, where danger or dishonour lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays, who guards her or with the worst endures." This emphasises Adam and Eve's roles in the relationship, with Eve being inferior, as Adam wants them to stay together while they work together, whereas Eve wants freedom, representing the common relationship dynamic at the time where the man holds the power, whereas the woman is under the man's control. Other sources, Long 2003, 104-106, complement this view, saying that she would like to find solitude instead of being constantly observed by Adam. Within this extract, Milton uses alliteration in phrases such as danger and dishonour and safest and seemliest. This draws attention to these phrases, allowing the contrast between them to be highlighted to the reader, emphasising how dangerous it would be to split up and how much better it would be to stay together while working. Looking closer at the extract from the text, the abstract noun worst has been used interestingly in this context, as it resembles one part out of a common set of wedding vows first introduced in 1519, 118 years before Paradise Lost was published, for better for worse. By using similar vocabulary, the text is akin to wedding vows. As well as this, Adam is attempting to control Eve in this situation, which is an intrigue in comparison to wedding vows, which could be considered as a form of control, as well as concreting the gender hierarchy in the relationship, in which the woman is secondary and by proxy inferior. Across both the Bible and Paradise Lost, women are presented as secondary to men and therefore inferior, which can be seen via the character of Eve in her presentation in both texts, as well as her relationship with Adam in both the Bible and Paradise Lost. Within Genesis, Eve's relationship with Adam is focused on at large, presenting her as both lesser and, if he owns her, creating a standard of relationships that will continue for centuries to come. In Paradise Lost, Eve is explored more as her own character and given more agency, though the difference in power in the relationship can still be seen even from the perspective of an onlooker, with likely no knowledge of these gender dynamics between men and women. Though in conclusion, both texts present women as secondary and inferior to men through the character of Eve, which has led to current gender dynamics between men and women in society today due to religion being used as a crutch for millennia. References: https://www.paradiselostinmodernerenglish.com https://www.kingjamesbibleonline.org/https:// scholarcommons.sc.edu.senior_theses /552 https://doi.10.11.in.com/doi/abs/10.11/1035835806060539 https://books.google.co.uk /books ? HL equals EN ampersand and LR equals ampersand and ID equals LEQ UTC PCQ dash EC E ampersand and OI equals FND ampersand and PG equals PA337 ampersand and DQ equals gender plus roles plus and plus genesis plus revisited plus Myers plus ampersand OTS equals IZVR EFRGX NOW ampersand and SIG E equals 9QKVK80X underscore or 95M FGLP EA1D E7HC E0OK hash V equals 1 page ampersand Q equals gender percentage is 20 percentage roles 20 and 20% Genesis 20% 20 revisited percent 20 Myers ampersand F equals false https://scholarsarchive.byu.edu/viewcontent.cgi article equals 1019 ampersand context equals English _S symposium https://www.jstore.org/stable/2446516 SEQ equals 2